This is a look at the top recent undercover investigations from the Wave 3 News Troubleshooters. This is Uncovering the Truth.
Committed to uncovering the truth. Welcome to a special edition of the Wave 3 Troubleshooters as we present to you our most important investigations from 2021. I'm John Bowl.
And I'm Natalia Martinez. Around this same time 3 years ago, a young mother and LMPD detective died in a fiery crash. You're about to see what happened in the moments right after as we reveal the reason behind that crash.
Is there anybody in it?
The frantic moments as the first officer gets to the scene of a horrific crash. LMPD detective Deidre, or Dee Dee Mingadote, trapped inside the burning vehicle. This new exclusive video shows the moment when the MSD driver who hit her learns she was dead.
Yeah, I've seen there. And where?
In that vehicle.
Yes, the police officer.
Oh my God, she's dead then, right?
I got traffic units coming out. They're going to have to handle the investigation. Did you see a female in the car?
Somebody told me. And when I looked up, it was too late.
What he was looking at, the court documents say, was porn from 2:12 p.m. through the time of impact at 2:17. He didn't log off the porn until 2:20, 3 minutes after the crash. Here's a look at this other exclusive video. Mingadote's car is in the right lane pulling over a truck. More than a dozen other vehicles move around to the left lane. But here is Burdett's truck, never swerving or stopping before slamming into her car, despite what he tells the officer.
What happened? Do you know what happened?
I come down the center lane. Well, I was in the slow lane, I'm sorry. And I started to switch over.
I'll take care of it.
And last thing I know, I'm not even sure I hit the car first, but I think I did.
Detective Mingadote was 32, leaving behind a 9-year-old son and dying on Christmas Eve. The pain of her family.
I gotta go. I gotta take care of some stuff.
And the officers who called her a friend. Burdett has now been convicted of DUI and murder. He's currently appealing.
Now to a problem that we can't fix with phone calls or TV cameras. The number of people seriously mentally ill on the streets, homeless. Sometimes an important story happens right in front of your face, but you don't see it. Or maybe you don't really want to see it. Every minute of every hour of every day for weeks and then months, Janae Prater sits under an awning of a vacant building across the street from our television station. Never moving except to use a bathroom that isn't there. Always watching a world go by that somehow left her behind. It happened sometime after 2016 when Janae's Facebook page shows a normal life with typical kids, an ordinary job, and an orderly household. Now, she just sits here from the heat of the summer to the polar plunge of the winter. Below zero on this night in February, she lies under her blankets and the big icy white blanket that covers everything. Hundreds of people driving by every day, like me.
Is there anything I can do to help you? Anything you need to eat or drink or?
Probably something to eat.
She accepts help from me and others passing by.
Here you go. You're welcome.
Her requests, simple: water, burgers, and blankets. Her situation, complicated: evicted, jailed, and hospitalized.
Now I'm in the streets, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get some help with housing because I got illegally kicked out. Like, I'm not a drug addict, you know what I'm saying, who has, a strong addiction. Then they took me to Central State, which is like a psych facility. But I was offered a tent like 5 times, and I told them, that's not you cannot fix that. You can't fix this problem. You can't resolve this problem with a tent. Now, mind you, I didn't have anything when I came out of jail.
The longer she talks, the better I understand the real issue here.
I had to actually get Mexico representative in the situation because the United States does not want to do anything for me. They do not want to get me out the street. So I have faith in Mexico.
A Harvard study found 1/3 of the nation's homeless have a serious mental illness. You see it all around downtown, and the numbers grow every year. The latest count in Louisville found 1,100 people homeless on any given night.
Homelessness is the effect of systems that are not working and are not a safety net that is not catching everyone.
The head of the Coalition for the Homeless says Louisville ranks high nationally in available treatment for substance abuse, but on the low end for mental health treatment for people like Janae.
So we are very weak in that area, and so there's never enough places that people can go, either just to get the services or to get some kind of setting where a person can stay overnight and get services.
Y'all hungry? Want something to eat?
You got some food?
I got some snacks, yeah.
Jeff Gill is one of the outreach workers on the streets every day, trying to talk people experiencing mental illness to get help.
If you've experienced street homelessness, you're going to have mental health struggles from that alone.
But what can be done for the homeless who refuse mental health treatment?
Unless they are presenting a danger to themselves or someone else, and then it is an option to discuss getting a mental inquest warrant, which would basically make someone get the help that they deserve.
And that's exactly what happens to Janae. On March 10th, she disappears. Police confirmed to us they took her away with a mental inquest warrant. A couple days later, the building she leaned on for months goes up in a 2-alarm fire. And a couple of days after that, Janae is back, sitting in the broken glass. Citing health privacy laws, no one will tell us why she's already back on the street.
So a mental inquest warrant is really just a judge's order to have that person assessed to see if they meet criteria. It doesn't guarantee that someone is going to be held in a hospital or that they're going to be forced to engage in treatment.
In Kentucky, by law, to keep someone hospitalized who doesn't want to be, that person must be a danger to self or others, can reasonably benefit from treatment, and hospitalization has to be the least restrictive mode of treatment available.
So you have to meet all of the criteria in order to be held. Well, hospitals are really designed to help people stabilize and then come back out into the community. So a hospital is not necessarily a fix for a mental health crisis.
One thing did change in Janae's few days away. Her blankets, water, and food are gone.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I bring her some more.
When they came this last time and got you from here on the mental inquest warrant, did you think, okay, now finally somebody's going to do something right here?
No, I didn't.
You didn't have any faith?
No faith at all, because they've been lying to me. So when they took me here, I was like, I don't really want to go. Is this going to help my situation?
And then March 26th, one more change. A fence goes up around her burned out backrest, and she's kicked out. A lot of fences in Janae's life, and the grass isn't greener on the other side. Natalie Harris said only 25% of the people who qualify for housing assistance in Louisville actually get it, but there's a move underway now to try to change that.
We'll be right back with more. This next investigation is on a controversial issue that we exposed.
Criminal suspects, many with violent histories, getting bailed out of jail.
In this investigation, we discover a mountain of facts that one victim said didn't seem to matter. For far too many women, every day is living a nightmare.
You're a piece of shit.
Taking blows by words.
Backstabbing
or by sheer violence.
Because when you jumped over the table at me.
No, because you're fault.
My fault.
Go ahead.
You go on saying that I'm doing all this bad and the other. Yeah, I'm very aggressive. Yeah, I'm very hurt. Yeah, I drink a lot. You're right. Absolutely. You know why? Because I do that to drown my sorrows every day.
This is Michael Strong, Christina McIntosh's husband for 10 years. His voice in those videos still haunts her. She shows us pictures, bruises to her face, broken bones, and marks around her neck for one of the many times she says Strong strangled her.
Purgatory. And every once in a while I got to get out and go to hell.
Her voice quivers when she speaks of him. Her hands start to shake. That's because she feels at risk for her life and is angry the Bail Project paid $5,000 cash for Strong's bond.
They just got to be kidding me. You're a joke. The bond was set that high so he couldn't get out to kill me. The judge did that for a reason.
The Bail Project, a national organization with a chapter in Louisville, believes that freedom should be free and money shouldn't determine who gets out or stays in jail. They claim they researched the person's case before posting their bond to make sure they'd be a good candidate. So I researched Strong's case. Cases, too. Right across the Ohio River in southern Indiana, I found 13 previous charges of domestic violence, including one charge for strangulation, which was dismissed in exchange for pleading guilty to domestic battery. It was one of 4 domestic violence convictions. That's aside from the strangulation and assault charges brought by Jeffersontown police for McIntosh. The strangulation charge, a felony, was later amended down to attempted strangulation, which he agreed to plead guilty to.
I literally, every day I had to fight to stay alive.
What do you pay for?
Get out of my face and leave me alone.
You don't pay for
Mike, get out of my face and leave me alone.
The years of abuse McIntosh describes makes leaving, experts say, that much more difficult.
There's this underlying sort of psychological abuse that often is the basis upon which the violence erupts.
Doris Lee Gilbert is the former director of the anti-domestic violence organization, the Mary Byron Project. Gilbert says posting bond in a domestic violence case should be considered carefully since lives are at stake.
Maybe they never called the police before because the person said to them, if you call the police, I'm going to kill you.
At the time the Bail Project bailed Strong out on March 2nd, they told us Strong had come to court for 5 hearings and hadn't violated any court orders. In the criminal case, there was no mention on paper about Strong's criminal history or the pictures and videos McIntosh had. But just down the hall in family court, the history, the pictures, and the violence were all on paper for anyone to see. On February 5th, 1 month before the Bail Project bailed him out, the judge had issued and reissued emergency protective orders in her courtroom, something McIntosh says the Bail Project should not have only read, but considered.
Take that money and give it to victims. Take all that money you brag about. Give it to the ones that need a voice. Give it to the homeless.
Even through the trauma, McIntosh is fighting, unafraid to share her story, if not for her case, for the sake of the thousands of women who know exactly what her experience was like.
But I'm not going to live my life in fear anymore of him. I'm going to stand up, and I want every victim out there to know that they can be a victor.
The Bail Project's director told me they did their due diligence. They also, though, came under fire when we exposed that the Bail Project had paid the bond for a violent man with a criminal history who then went on to crash into and kill a 17-year-old cheerleader.
Now, as the heroin crisis worsens, we've been told that authorities are going after drug dealers in overdose cases with homicide charges. Are they? Here's what I found. The photos fail to foreshadow the finish.
Sunday I started crying, and I cried till Tuesday. I mean, it's just hard.
The text to Mom reveals so much more. Somewhere I lost my fight. I'm trying to find it again. I just needed to get away from me, but I was always there.
She really tried. She tried to get better.
From nurse on college scholarship to patient at treatment centers, Tommy Lilpop was one of 2 drug overdose deaths the same night at the Greenwood Red Carpet Inn. Police told her mother that her boyfriend continued doing drugs for days next to Tommy's decomposing body.
So she was cremated without me ever seeing her.
Kathy Lowe begged police to file homicide charges against the repeat offending dealer who could be traced through Tommy's phone.
He kept trying to tell me that there was no such charge in Indiana for dealing a controlled substance that results in a death. And then got mad at me because I said, well, yes, there is. It's Indiana Code 3542-1-1.5. And he got mad and he started screaming at me that my daughter was just a drug addict that he didn't have to do nothing for me, and he certainly didn't have to do nothing for her.
Same kind of story for the mother of Robert Gibson, who died of a drug overdose. Too afraid to do an interview, she insists the people who sold her son the fatal dose are still dealing drugs at 27th and Slevin in Louisville. She says she couldn't get police to do anything about it, so she called me. I went undercover and recorded as many as 10 people per hour on bikes or on foot, going in, spending a few minutes inside, then coming out. And cars pulling up, waiting for this man to come out. Something happens through the window, and then cars take off, over and over. One of the people living here is Robert Smothers, charged in 2013 with trafficking marijuana and possessing cocaine. 2015, trafficking heroin and engaging in an organized criminal syndicate. 2017, trafficking methamphetamine. And in 2018, sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. I'm John Bull with Wave 3. Do you know a Robert Gibson? I went back to the house with a visible camera this time.
I'm going to be honest with you, okay? Robbie was my friend.
Looks like to me a bunch of drug addicts.
I love
here,
Robbie.
Not anything
okay?
else.
And it hurt me bad, okay? He didn't get his drugs here.
Well, ain't nobody going to want to come here and get their drugs
I like
because
Robert, man.
they ain't,
I love Robert.
you know, we do drugs. We don't sell drugs.
You do drugs, you don't sell drugs?
Yes.
What drugs do you guys do?
It doesn't matter. It's none of your business.
You said you do drugs, so I'm just
But it's
following
none
up
of
with
your
a question.
business what we do.
I've also been watching the house here, undercover, just watching, and up to 10 people an hour coming and going, spending a couple minutes inside.
Is that wrong to have 10 people? It don't matter if we got 100 people a day coming to our house.
Turns out my camera wasn't the only one on this home.
See, this lady's had a camera facing our house because we've been harassed.
Do they think the drug dealing's going on here too?
Well, you know, drug dealing goes on, everywhere in Portland.
It appears to be a good time to sell drugs in Louisville. Data from LMPD shows a steady decline in all drug trafficking arrests since 2018. Cocaine, heroin, meth trafficking arrests, all plummeting each year. In fact, there hasn't been a first offense heroin dealing arrest for years.
Yeah. Have y'all ever thought about how the heroin and stuff gets down here? Because I've never went in a house and someone said, I'm making a batch of heroin today, okay? But we've got plenty of it down here.
The problem is I have to be able to show that it was your particular drug that precipitated that particular death.
This is the man in charge of the DEA's Louisville division, overseeing operations in 3 states. He says from April 2020 to April of 2021, there were 188 drug overdose deaths just in Louisville, an average of 1 every 2 days. He insists they are prosecuting overdose deaths as homicides. Since 2017, the DEA's heroin investigation team has reviewed 435 overdose cases, initiating 27 investigations and prosecuting 46 people.
Many of them, unfortunately, just the evidence isn't there. I mean, that's what it comes down to. These are criminal investigations and federal prosecutions. You have to have the evidence. It takes time to get it, and sometimes no matter what you do, it just isn't there.
Back at 27th and Slevin, they think police and prosecutors have their priorities messed up. They told her.
Arrest drug dealers, they give them life, and then the child molesters and all that, they get probation. You're allowed to rape kids, but don't sell drugs.
So, did that story have any effect on what was going on at that house? You'll find out later this hour.
More investigations in a moment.
Now to a problem we've been exposing for years and you've probably seen for yourself.
A sea of abandoned cars littering our streets. Troubleshooter Mark Stevens continues our investigations.
I had a lady the other day that ran off in the yard because somebody was coming and she didn't see him when she turned out of this street.
Ralph Pendergraft is one of thousands of residents this year to call and complain about an abandoned car.
This van has been here for 9 days. So far.
His neighbor hired a contractor to do some driveway work. At the end of the job, their van wouldn't start. She told me they pushed it here and left.
If it's a work vehicle, why would you not come and get it, take it home, try to get it fixed, or take it somewhere to get it worked on?
That's a question lots have asked before calling Metro government to complain.
Our examination of complaints to Metro Call for abandoned cars shows they've more than doubled in the past 6 years, from 2,200 in 2012 to 4,800 in 2018.
Since that story aired 3 years ago, the complaints kept rolling in. 3,500 have been called in through August of this year.
It's an eyesore to the whole city.
Cars on ramps, on blocks, missing wheels. This one missing, well, almost everything.
This car is part of the problem.
Justin Wells says his cousins bought this car as a source of parts for another, but it's become a community scrap heap.
We were going to use it for spare parts anyways. It just seemed like a big hassle just to come out here and tell everyone to stop.
Now they're letting it rust in the street because of paperwork problems.
You can't take it to the scrapyard unless it's got a title.
LMPD tagged it for towing, but when it gets picked up is anybody's guess. Cars can and do sit for months.
It's been sitting out there since at least the beginning of August.
Or even longer. This car was inspected and declared a total loss a year ago, and this abandoned Buick has become a punchline. Street art. Compliments of Mayor Greg Fisher.
I busted out laughing. It was the first humorous thing about it.
Sometimes I get 3 or 4 a day.
Metro Council President David James isn't laughing, though. He says the halts are dangerous to traffic.
People run into them.
To children.
A child chases a ball underneath one of those. It's sitting up on bricks.
To Louisville.
The bottom line is we need a tow lot.
And James says the mayor's administration has shown no urgency to buy a new one.
No, we've appropriated the money to the administration to be able to purchase a new tow lot about 2 years ago, but the mayor has yet to purchase one.
Metro government has a list of 43 locations, but you can cross off 2/3 of the list for being in the floodplain or too small. It considered storing 600 cars at the fairgrounds, so they'll scratch that plan because they may have needed to remove all of them with only 24 hours notice. The Metro Council even toured this warehouse, but it's in an area James wants the mayor to consider off limits.
I don't want to see a new tow lot for the city of Louisville west of 9th Street.
Because he says West Louisville has been dumped on for years.
The history of things that happen west of 9th Street in the predominantly African-American part of this city, from brownfields to chemical dumping to everything else that the city didn't want, has been in that area of the city, and there's no reason to put a tow lot there now.
What's left on the list then? Mayor Fisher says not much.
The impound lot has been a real, kind of bedeviling solution to find a place, number one, where neighbors will accept it.
LMPD says at this time it does not appear there are any viable options available for sale. We are currently working towards a multifaceted solution to manage and reduce the number of vehicles at the tow lot. Fisher says he's not giving up. He wasn't sure if new federal infrastructure money could boost the $2 million already approved by the council.
As soon as we find a property that's a solution and partners that can help us out, we will be moving on an impound lot because it's a community-wide problem.
But to residents, the search for a new tow lot appears just as broken down as the cars littering Louisville.
And with all the surplus money that the mayor says he has, there should be all kinds of vacant property that there could purchase.
That van in Ralph Pendergraft's neighborhood was finally moved, but only after somebody else crashed into it.
You've heard a lot this year about suspected drug houses and LMPD's efforts to bust them as the Breonna Taylor story unfolded. But this investigation finds a dramatically different story in old Louisville. Spend some time outside 103 St. Catherine, across the street from Engelhard Elementary School, and it's not hard to figure out what's going on. A steady stream of people, day and night, as many as 20 per hour, walking in, spending a couple of minutes inside, and then leaving. Sometimes they scatter fast. Sometimes there's a line to get in. Money is often out when they go in, wads of money, up to $100 bills. They emerge with hands in their pockets, or they pull out and check what they just got in a small wrapped package, or place it in their mouth, a common tactic in case they're confronted by police. I record transactions right outside the house, too. A panhandler on the corner walks over and forks over some cash to a guy on the steps who hands him back something from the palm of his hand. What are they buying? It's hard to say, but this guy unwraps and pops the orange cap on a syringe. Then, one of the guys from 103 St. Catherine gives him what appears to be a small, wrapped, light-colored packet with another one visible in his other hand. He spends some time preparing the syringe, then disappears between homes with it. When they leave, we shoot what they left behind.
There's needles in the alley, on the property. There's needles everywhere.
One of the neighbors, constantly cleaning up what they're leaving behind, asked us to alter her voice and hide her identity because she's afraid of retaliation.
Well, I think the business is booming because you see needles everywhere. You see cars double parked. You see all these people in front. They came across the street. They were under my neighbor's stairwell shooting dope.
She says she has complained to every authority she can think of while counting 11 drug overdoses in front of 103 St. Catherine since July. The first day I start watching, this person walks into the residence, 10 minutes later comes out, and goes to the ground, occasionally twitching or flopping around. The stream of people entering and leaving 103 St. Catherine continues, sometimes pausing to look. The apparent overdose now lying out in the roadway, backing up traffic during evening rush hour. After 15 minutes of this, Louisville police arrive, but nothing happens. When the person is eventually able to get back inside the residence, the officers leave. And a few minutes later, there's another line of people waiting to get in. I try to talk to one of the people coming and going from here. What are all the people coming and going from here doing?
You have to ask all them people.
Is this like a drug house?
No.
No? We've got video of people coming and going from here. What's that?
It's just frustrating because I can sit there and watch someone pull up and someone walk out and do the handoff of drugs and money over and over and over, and I may be there for this amount of time.
This is a longtime old Louisville resident who has owned properties in the area, silhouetted as well, fearing retaliation. He says he has complained multiple times to New Directions, the nonprofit that owns 103 St. Catherine and other buildings next to his properties.
Usually it's met with resistance. They are very hesitant to talk to anyone.
New Directions talk to me. They say they're just as disturbed about this as the neighbors. They say the trafficking here is so obvious, they've even tried to sell drugs to the New Directions workers who have visited the place.
We did go to court and we got an eviction order.
They got an eviction order way back in November, but it was appealed, and New Directions attorney says the pandemic has made it easier to prolong evictions.
Instead of having it heard right away, it's set for some time down the road. And COVID obviously has hurt everyone's opportunity to be heard in court. Eviction court's one of the most.
A New Directions officer wonders why police haven't taken action on something so obvious. I see them at the residence a couple of times.
In the past 6 months, we have received approximately 17 calls for service to this address.
The assistant chief tells me they're handcuffed by the mass defection of 200 officers over the past 2 years. That's 15% of the force, leaving them thin on investigating these kinds of cases.
We used to have impact platoons in all of the divisions, but unfortunately those officers assigned to those impact platoons who would typically deal with a complaint, they had to go back to riding the street because obviously we have to be able to answer and make all of our calls for service.
He says another challenge is even if they make a bust, the court system will turn them loose in 4 to 6 hours anyway.
I think the police felt it's contained in this little building. Let's, ignore it and hopefully it won't spread and our job will be a little easier.
After that report aired, a customer of that house came forward to tell me how it all works.
You'll see that part of the investigation when we return. Welcome back. That investigation that you just saw prompted one of its longtime customers to tell us the inside story of how it all works.
And points us to another high-dollar heroin house not far away. While I was right outside, hidden in a surveillance vehicle, recording up to 20 people an hour, walking into 103 St. Catherine with wads of cash, walking out with small wrapped packages, or filling a syringe and injecting heroin right there, this man was one of the customers.
I injected, a normal amount that I would normally inject, and it took me out immediately the minute I did it, and died, basically.
He was one of the 11 overdoses there in 5 months. In fact, he OD'd on back-to-back days. The second one should have killed him.
They had to do CPR and put tubes down my throat and everything to get me back. Narcan didn't work, so I was in the hospital for 6 days.
He asked us to conceal his identity and alter his voice because he says he would be killed for what he's telling us.
We have one apartment where there's a lady that sells heroin, fentanyl, and meth, and there's people there using, it's kind of like a little flop house. And then another apartment there is what they call plug, is the guy that supplies the heroin. And the people there, if they'll take anything. So if you have $10, $15, if you have guns, if you have food stamps, if you know, people go and they boost and steal and bring stuff there to trade.
He says the Atlanta supplier is often inside, and after being in operation here for over a year, doesn't have much fear.
They're armed and they're ready. They have contingency plans in place. So, and if they do get locked up, they're going to be able to make bail, believe me. They make thousands and thousands of dollars a day there. I mean, if you've seen 20 people in 1 hour, that's 1 hour. And if I can go there and buy a gram to an ounce, that's a lot of drugs. So that the rabbit hole's deep, you know. That's not like a small fish in a big pond, you know what I mean? It's a big fish.
I saw police at the place a couple times, but I see only one arrest in that area over the past 6 months on LMPD Crime Tracker for a vehicle break-in. This is what the assistant chief said at the time of my first report.
If we stop someone leaving a place with narcotics, generally we can arrest them, we can cite them, but if we do arrest them, they're out within a matter of 4 to 6 hours. And then when you start looking into the actual people selling the drugs, the drug dealers, generally, and this isn't all cases, but generally we have to arrest these folks numerous times before they get any prison time or there's any consequences.
Where there's hundreds and hundreds of cars that go by every day. The police go by there every day. They know what's going on there. So it's like, how is this happening?
The man I interviewed is in rehab right now. He said the other heroin hotspot in town isn't far away, just down the street here at Ormsby and Floyd. So I spent some time right here, secretly watching and recording. Again, up to 20 people an hour coming and going from 312 Ormsby. Cash out, hand-to-hand transactions out front, cars pull up all day, and exchanges are made through the windows. Sometimes it's so busy, they fan out and serve 2 cars at a time. Here, the guy on the right digs into his pocket and serves a drive-through customer out in the middle of the street, while the person on the left takes a hit of something in a glass tube from the other car. Same street where cops drive by, and on the rare occasion when someone isn't home, the customers pile up out front waiting.
It's easier to buy heroin than it is for me to go buy cigarettes at Thornton's at First and Broadway.
A neighbor tells me he has seen everything here from 20 people at a time dealing and doing drugs to a woman dead in the doorway. He doesn't mention the syringes and orange caps littering the ground around the house. While the drive-through lane at 312 Ormsby was staying busy daily, all the drivers passing by above on I-65 got introduced to the house on April 15th when it went up in smoke and flames. Suddenly, a different kind of crowd out front, 50 firefighters, unknowingly trying in vain to save a place that one of its former customers says was burning a hole of misery into the souls of the addicted and plenty of other people too.
The crime goes way deeper in the pain and suffering rather than service level, you know, the things that people are doing to go there and give him money for the drugs, you know, so you got people selling their bodies, you know, doing things to their family, stealing from the community, breaking in places, robbing people. Heroin is one of the only drugs that you will kill for that I know of.
One thing did not get scorched in the fire, the makeshift homicide memorial a few feet away, marking the spot where a man was shot to death months earlier. The Louisville arson chief told me they were unable to determine whether the fire was set or an accident. He did say that there were signs of drug use in the basement where the fire started.
When we return, my investigation into a hot-button topic of 2021, school safety.
It's a topic worrying parents. Are children in JCPS safe? Might depend on who you ask.
The district says that the media is blowing things out of proportion. But in this next investigation, we speak with one JCPS employee who says it's the district's numbers that are fake. Despite the constant brawls and students with loaded guns, JCPS has refused to allow resource officers back in schools. But records we obtained show police are having to be in JCPS schools anyway, and often.
We have found ourselves making more runs to the schools.
Sergeant Patrick Allen of Shively Police says their officers are sometimes stretched thin, diverted from city streets to classrooms and hallways.
In the meantime, we may be holding runs or may have officers making runs by themselves.
In a span of about 3 months this school year, his department of about 30 officers has made a total of 78 runs to Western High School and Waller Williams Environmental. The calls for help, from fights to threats, weapon searches, and on November 4th, and 22nd for 2 actual loaded guns.
It seems that it's not going away, and feels like it's not getting any better.
The number of runs police are making to schools was information that JCPS told me they didn't track when I submitted open records requests. So I turned to the individual departments who ran the numbers to each school one by one. A tedious task given the staggering numbers found. A total of 3,273 runs for LMPD alone in just the last 2 school years. 758 runs between the first day of school through October 13th. That's an average of 12 runs a day for a struggling department that is 300 officers down. The top 4 types of runs in order are directed activity, meaning the officer checked something out or did so at the request of their major, investigations, general trouble, and calls of a person possibly harming themselves. Jeffersontown police have made 48 runs so far to schools in their area, like when Jeffersontown High School had to be evacuated because of a threat. Schools have seen all-out melees. 14 guns, most of which we uncovered were loaded. Numerous lockdowns, close calls, like when this student pointed a gun at another at Iroquois High School. Then there's cases like this. Administrators, teachers, and school security monitors injured. We exposed this video from Shawnee showing the monitor being knocked out while breaking up a fight.
It's pretty bad. It's sad.
The video is hard to watch for this JCPS security monitor. We're disguising his identity because he fears losing his job, but he decided to sit down with us because there's something that he fears more.
Yeah, because I fear my job every day, or, not my job, my life, to go in and that if I go break up a fight and get beat up by a student.
As of September 22nd, there were 215 security monitors across JCPS schools. They are not law enforcement, many of them coaches and teachers' spouses.
There's no consequences and they have no respect for somebody. If I tell them to go, let's say, take the hood off or go to class or something like that, they turn around and just, gang up on me.
Here's Superintendent Dr. Marty Polio back in October.
Schools, even though there's been media about the number of fights, are down about 45%, more than 45%.
Dr. Polio said on TV that the number of fights are down. Do you believe that?
No. I think they're down because referrals aren't being turned in. I've seen them call up parents, administration call up parents and say, "Oh, just keep your child home today or tomorrow because this happened," and it's not a formal suspension.
That's something Polio flat out denied when I asked him, and said if the number of referrals are not accurate, he wants to know. This monitor feels they have no resources and no immediate backup.
When I first came inside the school, we had SROs inside the school. It was more supportive to have somebody there if we needed it.
Back at Shively PD, Sergeant Allen says they'll continue to show up to schools whenever they're needed, no matter how grave. Not just to help out those on the front lines, but also to protect the educators and the thousands of students who simply want to be safe and learn.
I wish that we didn't have those issues. I wish nobody had to deal with those issues, honestly.
Here's another number the district says they don't track. The number of JCPS students that are shot and killed. That number now is up to 30.
We'll be right back with more investigations after this.
The Troubleshooters discovered a staggering problem in Indiana, getting Medicaid patients the care they need.
Thousands of times each month, the poor and medically fragile were left stranded trying to get to important medical appointments. It's the part of healthcare that should be the easiest, but for many in Indiana, it's become the toughest.
I have been fighting this fight for 2 years.
So difficult, it's hard to talk about.
This could be anybody's loved ones, and it's not right. It's just not right.
This isn't a story about the rigors of chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery.
And I know there's a lot of people now that have died over not being picked up.
This is a story about the overlooked act of just getting to the doctor. For people who are poor, have disabilities, or are medically fragile in Indiana, getting to the doctor is often impossible.
I have spina bifida, hydrocephalus, asthma, COPD, diabetes. I've been left high and dry numerous times. I can't even tell you how many times or the dates where I have been left, where they either showed up 2 hours late or not showed up at all. Probably 30, 40, 50. I mean, I can't, over the course of the last 3 years, I can't count.
She's talking about the Georgia-based company Southeast Trans that got a 4-year, $128 million contract with Indiana's Family and Social Services Administration to take over the system of rides to medical appointments for Hoosiers on Medicaid. Southeast Trans given an F rating by Indiana's Better Business Bureau. For others, the grade is more like incomplete because they keep getting canceled or stood up.
So you think you have a ride scheduled with a transportation company, and then a lot of times they will not show up. They cancel last minute. They are late. They may take you to your appointment, and then you don't have a ride home.
In Erin Stennett's tenure as a social worker, she could write a book about what happened to her clients.
She received a call from Southeast Trans saying, "We're sorry, we couldn't find you a ride." And she called me Monday morning in tears. "Erin, I don't know what to do."
Erin's book is nonfiction filled with horror stories about what happens to people right after they have to cancel important appointments.
She was put in ICU. She was in kidney failure. She spent at least a week in the hospital, and she never went home again. Within 3 weeks total, she was gone. She died. I was heartbroken.
To get a better idea how often riders are stranded, I analyzed the state medical transportation reports. The most recent one, November, shows 2,900 trips not provided because no provider was assigned, and 116 cases of providers no-showing. October, 3,446 trips not provided because no provider was assigned, and 150 provider no-shows. Teresa Pate, whose husband is nonverbal after a stroke, says the complaint investigations mean nothing because she says Southeast Trans lies in their reports. She cites one instance where Southeast Trans no-showed her husband, then claimed the driver was the one stood up.
No, I said, you weren't at my house because the home health care aide was standing there watching.
When she filed a complaint with the state about it, she says they followed up one lie with another one.
When I sent the complaint to the state, they tried to say they transported him to that appointment the next week, that they had came and got him and they took him to that appointment.
So what does Southeast Trans have to say about all this? Its Indiana director never responded to my phone messages or emails. I requested an interview with Indiana's FSSA in March, even submitted my questions at their request. Weeks later, I received a statement from their spokesperson writing, there are supply challenges when it comes to the network of transportation providers available to serve the increased member demand. They also said while Medicaid ridership has increased to over 65,000 per month, the driver's network is now 1,650. The numbers of no-shows and cancellations are apparent. What's harder to determine are the numbers of people who've gotten worse or died as a direct result of missing a scheduled appointment.
Has your health ever suffered immediately after one of these times where you needed to get to the doctor but they left you?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
My shunt failed a couple of years ago, and I needed to see a neurosurgeon, and they were supposed to be transporting me to Norton's emergency room, and they didn't show up.
A friend of mine said her friend was supposed to have had 2 rides with them that they canceled on her, and just a few weeks later, she passed away from an undetected heart condition. And she told me last night, she said, I swore that if she had been able to have got to the doctor, they would have caught this.
All calls so far on the governor to scrap Southeast Trans as the provider have failed.
When we return, a deeper investigation into an inmate's death that now has the FBI taking a look.
Our job is to uncover what some don't want the public to see.
This surveillance video of an inmate strapped to a chair and tased was no exception.
We have to warn you, what you're about to see is graphic and hard to watch.
Yes, Jared. Are you having fun at your party?
No, Mom.
Where'd all those pretty girls come from?
I guess school.
I can't believe they'd hang around a guy like you.
I believe Jared turned 13. Oh, it was kind of the first girl-boy party.
Vicky Budd remembers this video and teasing her son Jared.
School, Mom, of course. I'm embarrassing him to death, you can tell.
But there's another video that this mom refuses to watch.
Never.
And frankly, no one can blame her. This is Jared on October 4th, 2018. He's in a medical isolation cell at the Harrison County, Indiana jail. According to a lawsuit, he tells the jail's captain he'd taken drugs. Those documents say that there were signs of an overdose that went untreated. He's eventually strapped into a 5-point restraint chair. His hands bound, his feet shackled. A spit guard is placed over his face and a helmet on his head. The sounds intensify, tased, and coming off a powerful drug that cost him and his family so much.
How Jared died and what those last moments must have been like. I'll never get over it.
At the jail and unable to move, the corrections officer, Matthew Holsey, begins to use his taser. Again, and again, and again. A total of 6 times. In the last 15 minutes of the video, the taser is placed on Jared's chest. And then you see this. The nurse, Michael Gregory, who also tases him, appears to step on Jared's shackled bare feet. The minutes after this, we're not going to show. Jared is moved to a gurney. They begin CPR, but it's too late. Vicky Budd's son was pronounced dead at the ER. The official cause of death, meth overdose.
What I won't do is agree to secrecy. This has to be exposed.
The FBI is now taking a look at this case for possible civil rights violations.
We'll be right back. We've done a number of stories on contractors bailing on customers, but in this next investigation, one guy left a family digging themselves out of a hole.
And a giant one. And wait till you hear what we also discovered about that contractor that shocked us all.
The original dig was kind of...
Visiting the Sacred's home, you would think they're getting a pool, given that giant hole in their yard.
It's a pit.
You'd be wrong. So this is where the rest of the house was supposed to
Yes,
go.
this is where our addition's going.
An addition that came to a halt when that hole grew and grew, threatening to swallow their home.
I mean, it's extremely dangerous because now even if you come close to it, the mud just crumbles.
Kirsta Sacra and her husband, a military man for 25 years, hired Tim Ridgway with Sunvow Construction. But after they say he kept digging, the hole's walls kept caving in. Since then, they say their lives have been kind of nerve-wracking, even sleeping in the front end of the house.
Because we're completely terrified that our house, the current house, is just going to start to shift this way and fall into it.
And during the day...
He's crawling under. Hey! That might be a good shot of this is our life now.
They say they're now, well, in the hole for $75,000. They say it's going to take to fix the hole and start building again. That includes the materials already purchased and $7,000, Kirsta says they've already paid Ridgway. Where is he now?
We have no clue. He won't answer calls, won't answer text messages, anything. And we were like, look, just make this right.
Several things didn't feel right to us. I couldn't find a business website, which he told the Sacras was under construction.
He has all this stuff. He's an open book. Brought over all of his notebooks. This is what I'm doing.
When I called Shelby County's courthouse looking for the business records the county requires, there was no record found under his name or Sunvow Construction. I turned to the state's business records to search there. no luck either. But there was one website where his name does come up. Kentucky's Sex Offender Registry. Convicted in Hardin County in 2008 for sodomy in the 3rd.
He's been around our kids for, months and months.
State records show Ridgway served a little less than 3 years and was released with a number of conditions. While he stopped showing up at the Sacras, I did track him down working somewhere else.
What can you tell us about her project? Because you kind of left it.
A liquor store. That's despite being arrested for DUI just 4 months ago.
I was dismissed from the job and threatened.
While his arrests were criminal, working as a general contractor without a general contractor license in Kentucky isn't. That's because Kentucky is one of a handful of states that doesn't require it as long as the GC has insurance. Only plumbers, electricians, and HVAC workers must have a license.
I mean, anybody can just be like, oh, I'm a general contractor now, and, they can take you for anything you got, I guess.
Law enforcement's hands are usually tied if any of the work's been done.
The boys will jump, and I'm like, do not move, don't jump.
Homeowners like the Sacras are often referred to attorneys to try to sue, an expensive and long process that can require even more patience.
He's obviously not going to come forward and be like, let me do what's right. And I want to make sure no one else is taken by this guy.
After our story aired, another contractor stepped in to help and made sure the family's home didn't collapse.
The most complaints I get for investigations center around suspected drug houses, and it helps when I'm led through the process by my own informant. In July, I investigated a mother's complaint about the failure to charge anyone in the overdose death of her son or even crack down on the alleged drug house where she says he bought the heroin near 27th and Slevin. The house was still flourishing with what appeared to be drug activity when I secretly watched.
We do drugs. We don't sell drugs.
You do drugs, you don't sell drugs?
Yes.
Then, on October 4th, a suspected drug overdose death in the same house at 311 North 27th. While nothing changed there, it did at an alleged drug house only 2 blocks away.
Whenever you would air a story, they would quit going to houses and then just start meeting on side streets in different vehicles. And it would be a drop and go.
So after I did that story on that 27th and Slevin,
yes,
that changed the conduct on
yes,
25th and Slevin?
Yes.
How does this man know? He says a friend of his was making the 2-hour round-trip drives from their town to 25th and Slevin to get heroin every day. This was this person's daily routine for months, coming to Louisville like this?
I would say years.
Years?
Yes.
To the same dealer?
Yes. Comfortable. Because addict, once they find a good product, they want to stick with it. Just like we do when we find a good restaurant, we want to keep going to that restaurant and get a good meal.
This is the restaurant, 2511 Slevin. Our informant, identity obscured for his protection, sent me pictures of the alleged dealer, his vehicle, and the home because he sometimes made the trip here with his friend for protection.
I brought them here because their mother was begging. If you don't take them, somebody else will, and they might not come home.
Were you ever scared when you were sitting there waiting?
Oh, many times. Every time, not just many times, but every time. I'm from a small town, and you get a small town in a big city, there's so many eyes watching. I felt like there was 1,000 eyes watching my vehicle when I pull in. I would always lay my handgun in my lap in case somebody come up on me, bust my window or shoot whatever. Because I don't know what's going on around other gangs or other dealers or other, wanting to rob whatever. Because you got other addicts out there that are watching that house.
I was watching it too, undercover. The activity played out exactly as he described. A man in a blue pickup truck pulling up, sitting in the vehicle for sometimes hours at a time. The pickup driver gets out and escorts the people who walk up around the side of the house to a back door, and then they both emerge a couple of minutes later. Same routine, over and over, even in the cold rain. The home stays busy every time I watch, with people being dropped off by waiting cars, or coming and going by motorcycle, or by bicycle, undaunted by the police driving by as they're coming out.
And they would take me to the addresses. And they would go inside and come back out and be just, you know, they'd already be high when they come back out. And then we'd get in the car and leave.
After watching and recording for a couple of weeks, I tried to interview the pickup driver in the middle of the routine.
I'm John Bull with Wave 3. I'd like to ask, could I ask you a couple questions?
I don't want to answer no questions.
I want to ask you about this drug operation that's running here on this house.
I don't know nothing about no drugs, man.
You don't know nothing about drugs?
No.
I got contacted by a guy who has been coming here and told me how it all works.
What's that?
You invaded my space.
We traced his license plate to a man who has listed 2511 Slevin as one of his addresses and was sent to prison after pleading guilty to cocaine trafficking. Our informant says it's worse than a crime. It's profiting off of somebody's disease. He stopped coming and stopped enabling after attending Narcotics Anonymous meetings to educate himself on what his friend is dealing with.
I always thought it was a choice and they could quit. But after being around them for over a year, it's not a choice, it's a disease.
My informant said he notified law enforcement about this, but he says they dragged their feet.
If you have an issue or a problem, give us a call, write us an email, or hit us up on social media. Thank you for joining us tonight.
We'll keep working to be your voice, uncovering the truth and exposing wrongdoing to try to make this a better place to live. Good night.